Hello, everybody, the world over, and thank you very much for joining us today. This is episode 2 of the Snaf2 Grim Tales from Down Below podcast, and we're here to read through a couple more chapters for you. First, a round of introductions. I'm the original writer of Grim Tales and the dude with the funny accent. I'm Griddles. Hello. And let me introduce to you the man with the most buttery voice in all the fandom. It's Fabian.
Yep, that's me.
She's the woman with all the snappy insight. It's Mini Mandy.
Hello, everybody.
He is the man of the hour, the man with the power. Goodness me, it's Bird of Terror.
Yes, hello.
We also welcome the outstandingly observant Benji Fox.
Hello, this is Benji.
Good Lord above, it's Zircon.
Guten Tag.
Plus, we give a warm welcome to all of our podcast spectators and listeners all over. We hope you enjoy today's reading of the comic and get some insights of your own. So, people, let's begin. We jumped off the previous episode at the end of Chapter 2, where we will reveal to us that Mini Mandy has a little hidden secret, and she's here to keep her brother safe from harm against the big sack of bugs and his underlings. So, it's time to launch into Chapter 3. Chapter 3 came out in roughly 2007. So it's a fair bit older than I'd say some of the current readers of the comic right now.
That was like a million years ago.
And when you look at that, Full Bleed Productions reappears.
It does reappear. Again, as I mentioned in the previous podcast, Bleedman himself used to be part of an actual production company with some other talented artists from the Filipino area, I suppose, before eventually leaving that to found what is now Blood Sugar Studios and become a commission-based artist rather than
Just to chime
a
in
professional
quickly,
creator. Yeah.
Lock, Bell, and Shock look a bit weird.
They've always looked weird. They looked weird in the original movie, as far as I remember.
Their head proportions just feel off compared to like how they look in the movie or Kingdom Hearts.
Yeah.
Well, that's mainly because they've been reproportioned to fit the two OC
They've
characters.
been bleedalized.
Yeah.
Mm.
Like, I could have sworn the middle one, Barrel, had a more ovalish head. Shock outright looks redesigned, especially with the hair. But yeah, Shock looks like redesigned completely.
I think he got tired of drawing all those weird stray noodles.
I like the fact the slide is working as a panel divider.
Bit of a transition for you.
Yeah,
I also
it's very
believe
well.
this poetry on this thing is probably the first bit of rhyming prose I'd ever written for a comic. So hopefully it turned out fairly well. I had to sort of make everything fit. I think we're still back at this stage, sort of took Grim Tales to be a little bit more literal in that it had to be framed as sort of like this ancient story.
It does kind of look like, this whole 3 days ago thing is being read in like a story hindsight.
We're at the point now where people's feet also begin to have a new design. I can tell you now, around about this time in PPGD, we had BR beginning to work on it, and we had Soyuga, the color coordinator and finishing touch guy, sprucing up the pages. Grim Tales did not have any of that going on, so the proportions and style are definitely a bit more cartoonish than other comics coming out around this time. And so this is where the action is.
I always liked that sword.
Yeah, it's a shame some of that just kind of stops after a while.
I feel as though when the Nurgle, spoilers, changes its residency, we get different aesthetic choices with how everything turns out. So this might be just how it works under Mini Mandy's control.
It might have something to do with the host's, level of skill and control and things like that. Like what's more acceptable to them as part of their skill set.
Yeah, it doesn't really look like Minnie is bargaining with this Nurgle. She's basically just using it at its full potential.
There's no buddy cop mentality.
They are one being. It's so effortless, like it just becomes the sword.
I suppose that's to be expected for someone who's born into the ownership of it, as opposed to receiving it. So yeah, there's plenty of dialogue here, plenty of text, but I feel like the action here is quite dynamic. Lots of motion lines, lots of impact points.
I gotta say, I don't really like the cards themselves, but I guess they're not the main focal point.
I'm pretty sure the cards were straight out of the movie, basically.
Blade feet.
Fairly, she's almost Bayonetta in that very aerobic style of fighting.
Like, she's not even standing anymore. Look at those tentacles.
Oh yeah,
She's like one of those like old Asian movie like high wire users. just like literally flying through the air on suspensions.
Don't get the impression that it's all the Nurgle that's making her do this. She's actually, for the most part, using all this athletic ability without the help of tentacles and shapeshifting. It's a skill that's established right from the start that she's in basically peak physical condition. She dances, she fights, she trains. We see that more later on, but it's definitely a skill set that she has over pretty much any other character her age. You don't necessarily have to be the heir to the Scythe of Death or a shape-shifting demon full of pure evil energy to be able to hold your own in a fight.
Now, she was definitely born super capable, and it made Junior jealous as fuck.
Oh, for sure.
She's just been trained to be like a child soldier.
She's trained to be a child everything. She's a
Sure, her mother
dancer.
is very proud.
Yeah, she's a fighter. She's, I don't know. Like, she even speaks Shakespearean. I'm assuming she's good with that shit.
It's Old English, Victorian English.
But specifically along those little Helga quips, like where they go like intentionally way too far just for fun, I guess.
So we wanted to sort of show her dealing with every element that was introduced. So the slot machines, yeah, we want to see her messing those up. The cards, definitely.
She had an answer for everything, and she completely decimated the entire enemy force.
Really? Yeah. Well, like I said, child soldier, one-person army, basically.
I remember there was some feedback on the forums several years later. People thought that the metamorphic powers here and the claws and everything were inspired by the video game series Prototype. But I can tell you that this page came out about 2 years
Did this come out like a full 0 before Prototype?
So I don't want to say that Mini Mandy influenced Alex Mercer, but you're welcome.
Oh, well, I mean, technically there's been some of this in comics and, things for years.
Also, I had a big thing for, well, splash pages are great, like when there's just one full frame to establish like a really badass pose, but this pose here at the top of this page is very much what we were hoping to get some oomph out of, I think it succeeded. It really made Minnie look good, just also saying, what else you got for me? It's also how you lure readers into a false sense of security. I'm sure Junior's having a hard time processing everything that's going on right now.
How did the fans at the time react to Mini Mandy having Nurgle powers?
It was the first big twist of Grimtails, I suppose you could call it. So a lot of people were really sort of hyped up for it, and then more so when she got to use them in action. This whole sequence at the time, I believe, had a really strong reception from readers, and that only made what happened next even more of a shock. But everyone was generally of agreement that Junior was a whiny little pussy, and a lot of people also felt that she shouldn't have been wasting her time on him, which then she came to feel later on too. Yeah, feedback for Mini Mandy and her use of powers was very strong.
Yeah, you mentioned in the last one that it switched. Their dynamic. It flipped.
Yeah, she started off as a very strong character, whereas her brother was a very weak character in terms of their personal development. She was already well established and capable. He was a whiny older sibling who resented the younger sibling for the attention and the abilities that she was bestowed. And then over the course of time, Junior developed naturally, whereas Minnie sort of regressed. And that's a slippery slope. When you make a character regress, you need to then sort of build them back up again stronger than they were to start with, which is quite a task considering how strong she already was at the very beginning. But the intention was to then give her something new to strive towards whilst emphasizing what she still had left over. Like this bit, for example. This is an example of Junior being a very, very pathetic character to begin with.
Extremely pathetic.
Yeah, I can definitely see why people hated him for a while.
His development and growth over the course of the next several chapters was supposed to be one of the biggest focal points, the biggest narrative successes of the comic, to sort of turn him from this into someone who not only embraced what he was given for the greater good, but then could also stand up to people like his own mother, which you would never imagine him doing at this phase of his character journey. Also, yeah, the general between Mini Mandy's puppy dog eyes in the bottom panel and the fact that her little Grimm's insignia is also looking a bit upset.
I always love the fact that that little insignia, or brooch, I guess, just kind of like emoted as well. Even though it made no sense.
No, it's just a sort of visual gag. Visual gags were alright when done in moderation. It would then carry over to another character who didn't speak at all. They'd convey a lot through visual gags and more subtle cues.
Something to be said about like how good of a character Minnie is and how bad of a character Junior is. The early saga definitely goes like it does an extremely good job of setting him up as pathetic and bad. Like he just got his life saved by an absolute hero, and then just spits in their face. Like what the fuck?
I mean, it takes a pretty forget the pun, spineless individual who goes from complaining all the time about someone to then having everything changed for the better by that someone to then continuing to rag on them.
Yeah, he was just a really annoying little boy.
Man, it goes even further than that. Like if they weren't even out of danger yet, he didn't even consider the ramifications of what he was doing.
Oh, here it comes. Let's just go to the next page and see how this gets progressively more painful for her.
Like I can't even like express in so many words, even though I probably should try since this is a freaking podcast. Like just how important the next few sections are.
I'm very happy with the poetic dialogue here, especially the last two lines. Trapped in its clutches, she tries to break free, but her efforts are useless, as it is not to be. And then you don't even need a sound effect to convey what happened to her just then.
I will say, when I was reading this like 4 years ago, right? Since I'm fairly new to the community, I remember when I got to this point, I was just like hooked, definitely. Just like I wanted to definitely see where this was going. And I can imagine that people reading at the time when it came out were feeling the same way.
It wasn't long after the Mandark fight where we had gotten into this territory, and another giant robot. I was like, yeah, really? And Bleed's like, trust me on this. And I'm like, okay. Because the giant robot from the Mandark chapter of PPGD kind of got dispatched fairly quickly, whereas this one sticks around a bit.
Like the absolute scumminess of him. Like it can't really be described in words.
I feel like as an early installment bad guy, Oogie did a very good job.
Oh, definitely. He definitely filled the role very, very well.
Looking back at this and then looking at modern GT where, spoilers, Junior kills her and like totally doesn't give a fuck. Kind of sucks.
Yeah, no, we'll have plenty of time to talk about how all the character growth from this chapter onwards to maybe chapter 7 or 8. What about Mimi and all that? We can talk later on about how that was completely invalidated by choices later on.
Even rereading this is still a powerful moment.
Very powerful. Like I'm getting like nostalgic pangs of anxiety. Like I can remember the feeling I had when I first read this.
I think we can argue that like this is one of the most gruesome pages that Bleed has ever drawn.
Oh, definitely.
We wanted to establish that this was not just a clone of PBGD. This was to be its own rating, its own level of depiction.
And the best way to do that,
Pretty good.
kill a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there have been other child character deaths later on in the series that have been less effective.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between blowing someone up and then, tearing them apart.
Let's also just take a moment to appreciate how ballsy the little ghost dog is.
That's Zero for you.
He's unfortunately, yeah, well, you can tell, right? I'm looking at the dialogue. You can tell which ones were thrown in by the author versus the editor. You just look for the extra needless exclamation points.
What do you think is worse? What happens to Mimi later on where she gets tortured and her hands cut off and whatnot? Or this?
Apples and oranges in terms of how the reader should interpret it, because one character is clearly still alive.
Yeah, I was gonna say one's kind of dead. I mean, that's kind of a
It's
big
not,
deal.
it's not quite the same to say that Minnie's still alive, considering she's a one-eyed zombie now. But this has definitely... She's lost more than her hands. So this is definitely probably a bit more impactful.
They prefer to be called the living impaired.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Apologies to any of our living impaired listeners out there. I don't wish to offend.
Oh yeah, and here's the eye. This was probably
Forget
this,
the
this was probably
stupid dog, you overgrown vegetable.
this was probably the biggest mystery at the time, right?
What this was all about.
Oh no, because you said this was like, what was it, 2 weeks?
Usually get at least
page?
one page out a week, sometimes more. One page was the minimum. We didn't go like months between updates.
Okay, so this was like a big deal of like, oh, what's this mean? What's that? What's going on? And then like,
Well,
the whole
there
big
was a lot of
speculation.
anticipation for each and every page that came out.
I'm sure this surprised people.
But everyone was like, oh, that's why he's got an eye beforehand. Because that was actually one aspect that a lot of people didn't clue in on. Before the flashback began, he had the eye. During the flashback, at least initially, he didn't have the eyes, but people weren't actually paying attention to that detail enough to notice.
Yeah, I think when I read this, I think I actually went back to the first page after this point, and I was like, wait a second, wait, what? He doesn't have an eye? Oh, he doesn't have an eye. Wait, what? How's that possible? What? Did I was not paying attention to that?
Not everything needs to be in your face.
Nah, I like that it's kind of subtle.
So I think at this stage, visually, someone had recently watched the second Matrix movie.
Here it is. The Great Wall of Snaf2.
I would hope that if one took the time to look into what's being said here that it actually reveals a lot.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm just like, this is one of the very few times I'm ever going to say this. I kind of feel like this should have been split into 2 or 3 pages.
You know, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, 2 pages would have been fine for this page to be split into. Like, it would. It
Yeah,
just
this
feels
is like
like
a
it feels
wall
a
of
lot.
text.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
a lot to throw at you.
The thing, I suppose, the counterpoint being, there's not much visually that needs to happen right now. It's just literally tall, slim dude talking to small, bony, bratty dude. There's not much else visually you can convey at that point. It is all about the information. You can split it into 2 pages, but then we'd have to be drawing more pictures of them just standing
Damn,
around.
Junior, you just watched your sister die and you still got this attitude.
Yeah, like, what the fuck, dude?
Yeah, what a little dick.
He's an entitled
Exactly.
millennial before they were even cool. I think we made the later pages like this one a little bit more visually engaging because there was such negative feedback at first to the wall of text. So like, let's try and convey with some pictures, not just words. But yeah,
Yeah,
the first
you can
one of them
definitely
just
tell there's a
standing
lot.
around.
You can definitely
Junior
tell
is
us a
still
lot more
kind
to this page compared to the previous one. Like this one is definitely better layout than the last one was.
Brief Olga cameos. Now, the black sheep doll you'll see on one of those video monitors was a tribute to I don't want to say a copycat artist. He was definitely unique in himself to a degree, but he was an artist who was quite fond of this art style and tried to emulate it fairly well. And his name was the Spanish for black sheep. So this was a little tribute to that. I think back in these days, like we talked about the J Dan reference in the Mandy flashback, there was a good little bit of tribute to other artists who were active at the time who were interested in the work.
Return of the Wall,
Mm.
Part 2, the Wallening.
We kind of just wanted to get this done.
No, I totally get that. Like, if this was modern GT, I'm just like, yeah, get all the info. I know you want to say it, just spit it out. But like, this was early on when the pacing was still good, and this just kind of slaps you right in the face.
Yeah, I
I
understand.
kind of wonder if this was done today, how much of this text would be like cut out and like inserted into future pages.
Oh my god, it would extend like 7 pages and be way less concise.
We wanted the last couple panels to be sort of lighthearted and comedic just to offset it.
Yeah, offset the fact that we literally just saw her get torn to pieces like a kid playing with a grasshopper.
The other thing too is that this actual chunk of dialogue really informs the motivation of Nurgles going forward and was also meant to harken back to motivations for what the Nurgle would do under a new host, and also how it's not really possible for anything other than a Nurgle to come from a Nurgle if they're to breed and have children. Nurgle is always about
from another Nurgle.
preservation.
Wow, what an interesting choice of words.
It's not like a Reaper's going to have kids of their own. Let's look at that motion blur in the second panel there.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's badass.
And then, yeah, this page was
Oh, this is some hardcore shit. I'm on.
people are like, oh my goodness, Minnie's a one-winged angel.
Like, I can't even lie, though. The whole, like, mechanical death angel over the actual angel over the corpse.
I do like the last panel there.
Oh my
The
god,
only-
look at the bird brooch.
Yeah, the only thing that really was negative about this was how Minnie's feet look.
I like how it has a short last panel where he's all like, what the fook?
What the-
Technically, the first uncensored use of the word. Technically.
I do like that with all this going on, this is something Grim would feel. You know what I mean?
Mm. He also probably realizes that someone's stepping on his toes right now by claiming a soul without his knowledge.
Yeah, didn't we have like an entire arc saying that some lives that are tied to his through destiny can't go without his approval? And yet here we are, because they're outside of his jurisdiction.
Yes. Not to mention, if you've bequeathed your power somewhat onto a member of the family and they then decide to wield it, it's like your son stepping in at the board of directors and saying, I run this show now.
Meanwhile, Redeemer.
those
Hey.
last 4 panels are they're really well illustrated.
Well, the
fact
first
that
2 are
Grim
basically
and
just
Mandy
copy-paste.
weren't watching their kids and let them run off kind of proves that they're bad parents.
We've actually gotten the impression that they're actually surprisingly good parents, especially on Mandy's side. But like this time, Junior snuck out, and then Minnie went looking for him.
Minnie was just dancing among the tombstones when this all started. I would. Here's the thing. I always wanted Mandy to have a sympathetic side, at least as far as her kids were concerned. She was harsh but fair.
I feel like that did come across in like literally the first chapter. She was like holding hands and picking up kids and stuff.
Yeah. And then when things shifted to her realm, her domain, things happening on her property, she was a bit harsher about things, but still,
Harsher, but yeah,
still willing to make compromises.
especially with that whole like bow and arrow thing. Like she was trying to give her like room to fail.
But yeah, she even relents to Junior's wishes later on because he actually shows some growth in front of her.
Now we have a reverse of the badass pose.
It's not reversed at all.
If you juxtapose the two side by side, they're fairly similar with the claws out and the sort of
They're exactly the same.
action hero pose.
I
And
like
even
how
in similar placement on the page itself. There
I
are
feel
no
like-
coincidences.
I feel like Bleedman just used the same base sketch for both of them.
I believe that was the point.
If you look hard enough, you'll find lots of examples of recycled posing and panels. And I mean, it's understandable. It makes his job a bit easier too.
Yeah, no one can really fault an artist for doing that, because drawing does take a lot of time.
And you'll see he just straight up loses a hand because he tries to defend his sister against the big angel man.
Yeah, that was kind of like Redeemer's thing, just cuts people's hands off, right?
Yep.
That's actually just sort of like a fundamentalist religion thing. Like you can't sin if you have no hands.
It was a classic form of punishment.
That's actually a good point. Didn't think of that.
When this page came out and this character was introduced to the comic, a lot of people didn't quite know where he was from. A lot of people knew about Spawn, and even some knew about the Flabiacs, but they didn't know about the angel heaven side of things. So probably one of the most popular questions on the forum back in the day was, which Digimon is that again?
Andromon.
Oh my god, I can definitely see why people would think that. That's actually really funny.
And yeah, this page caused a bit of concern.
I like it.
And then PPGD would copy this several years later.
Oh, he's sad. Boo-hoo. Single tear.
The last panel of this page, I think, is quite effective. This is the point where he realizes that he's been an absolute dick to her.
There's no more chances anymore. Like it's over.
Yeah, it is a really effective layout of panels, honestly.
When it comes to Grimm and the ferrying of souls, his job as the Reaper is to guide them on their next path. And if he was to abandon that position, bad things can happen to those souls. And there are people who can take advantage of his absence. That would have actually been an important point later had things gone a certain way.
Like this angel douche.
Well, this angel douche has come in to basically intervene. He's taking Minnie away from them, and there's nothing he can really do now because the duty of the Reaper is essentially done, and now someone has turned over ownership or control of the soul.
He's basically like a CPS, but for dead people.
You know, what you're saying about, Grimm's position in the universe and how his job is to ferry souls. That reminds me of how they wrote Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Well, Davy Jones as a mythological figure is essentially a nautical variation of the Grim Reaper.
Oh, I never knew how.
He's
I
a
never knew how far
personification
that
of
back that
death
went.
and despair.
No, the Grim Reaper himself is already just a personification of Father Time. Like if you actually look at the lore and the history behind the Grim Reaper, it actually goes back to old fairy tales about Father Time. It's like your time is up.
I think that the whole cloaked figure with a massive scythe is just a personification that's stuck over the centuries.
Well, it's because it's such striking imagery.
Characters like Davy Jones are analogies or riffs
Anyway,
of Grim Reaper. So the similarities are not coincidental.
like I love how in the later spoilers, by the way, I love how in the later parts of the comic they try to make it so that the Nurgling is trying to like throw Minnie under the bus for being bad, but like the instant Minnie goes away, they go full malevolent right here.
Yeah, that's not a coincidence. Unfortunately, I don't think it's ever going to be addressed that way. But once free of their host, and if the new host that they're given to is not of strong conviction, the symbiote has the chance of running absolutely amok. And the symbiote clearly, back at this stage, had more of like a hive mentality. They're speaking in like the collective perspective, I guess. But later
Yes.
on, when he becomes this buddy cop thing, which is a bit jarring compared to what we see in this page here, it
Mhm.
sort of speaks to what its true motivations are. I think now might be an appropriate time to say, for those listening at a later stage, this podcast is being done one day after the conclusion of the Grim Tales Further Orientation #2, where it also ends with the appearance of a certain time-based creature from another franchise. So the connections here are stark. But yeah, the whole thing of ending it on a quote from Clockwork is not a fresh thing, as you can see from this page, because this page came out probably about 13 years ago now.
But yeah, about Clockwork in general, like the main difference, like we were given a couple things from PPGD and GT. It's like even way back, like here, just in chapter 3, BR isn't like in his high swing yet. Neck isn't a thing.
Not at
But-
all.
But like both the universes have their own like timekeepers. PPGD had Time Squad, and this place has, well, not just Clockwork, but also like hourglasses of time. People who look through time. I'm pretty sure Nurgle is omniscient to some extent.
Hmm.
And like it just means that like later on, the differences between the two universes are very linked in like time.
One could sort of theorize that there's a multiversal aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
Later installments of PPGD to sort of, and the eventual promise to diverge the universes even more concisely so as to avoid certain connections with Grimtails down the track. Yeah, so Clockwork definitely has machinations going on here, but I always saw him as more of a tertiary character who shouldn't too heavily influence the actions and outcomes of the main cast. To know that he's always there watching and being involved somehow, it's a nice thought.
Yeah, he does take direct action a little bit, but like until later, he never really feels too ham-fisted. Does anyone remember like the first explanation BR gave to why PPGD and GT don't share a universe? He specifically mentioned a singular character, or rather
Well,
the lack of a
hold on,
singular
hold on.
character.
I think if we're gonna get into that topic, we should maybe wait until Wham. What do you think?
Yeah, it probably is the best time to discuss it, although we might be stuck on that subject for some time in
Yeah.
Wham. There's a
So
lot.
we might want to hold off till then.
At
there's
the
a
very
lot-
least, we should continue.
Oh, of course. And now we find ourselves in Grimtails chapter 4. Now that third chapter felt like it was fairly quick, I'm sure. But here we are with the thermos.
So how did people react to this page when it came out? Because this is sort of like one of those plot threads that was never really picked up back on in the
A lot of
original
people were very
Fantastic
hyped to see
show.
Danny. The whole thing about Clockwork was met with a bit of confusion because he was kind of like Fredburger, just popping it around. It's like, what the heck is he doing here? You know,
Oh,
where's
hey,
he
it's Fred Clockwork.
been? Clockburger. But when he released Danny from the thermos, people were like, "Oh yeah, Clockwork aging and de-aging." There's a bit of text here as well, but I think the visuals with the sort of the teal background cogs and everything.
Yeah, no, this isn't nearly as bad as Nurgle in generic Starspace. It's a little bit more interesting, and there's maybe half the dialogue.
Chronologically speaking, this isn't the first time Clockwork has gotten involved in plot events, we are led to believe. But he's decided that this is the threat that warrants releasing Danny from the thermos, and to the best of my knowledge, Danny has not gone back to the thermos since.
So this also makes me wonder, like, if any time-related events need to stop this, but not the fall of Megaville, then like, what's up? Like, what could have happened if this thing was left out of control?
Oh, quick thing to point out as well, Clockwork is the reason for Danny being here. You'll see in the middle page he's referring to the fact that Danny exists because Clockwork wills it. Clockwork is creating a paradox by allowing Danny to continue existing. And we're led to assume, I suppose, from later events that the original Danny himself is the one that no longer exists.
Well, that would make sense because if I recall, back in the show, Evil Danny was removed from time itself, and he existed outside of time's, grasp. So it would make sense that there's some, other force keeping him bound to existing. Otherwise, he would just disappear.
Yeah, the events in time that actually caused Dark Danny to exist literally like undid themselves. The only way he could exist right now is if someone with the power of time literally had some sort of time capture device and put him in it.
Absolutely. Back to your point about the divergent universes and everything like that. You've already got someone here who can facilitate that. And there were plot elements later on involving time manipulation, perhaps time travel, and ghosts that haven't eventuated so far, but would nonetheless have also involved Clockwork to some degree. So I wouldn't go so far as to call him an antagonist so much as he is a mechanism of the comic.
I like Oogie over there.
And this is, of course, where everything's running a bit wild. And this is the last appearance of the three kids because they do not get spared.
They, to an extent, sort of deserve it. Oogie Boogie, I don't think there's anything that could happen to him that would make me feel bad.
He's just a collection of bugs, so it's not like they could really, do much to him. I will
But yeah,
say
this pumpkin robot is excelling where the previous giant robot in a different comic done by Bleed in the recent times did not excel.
Yeah, that giant robot existed for all of one page and then got crushed by Buttercup.
Exactly.
I
mean,
will
it's
say-
great. It's a great establishing moment for Buttercup, but besides that.
I will say this is a great page to show just how dangerous the Pumpkin Reaper demon, whatever it is because it was established at what point that like having Reaper powers and demon powers was a giant blasphemy against creation.
Didn't we end up like talking about that much later?
It does come up when Grim Senior and Nurgle Senior get to have a bit of a one-on-one heart-to-heart. Yeah, we've got ourselves a full Godzilla moment now.
Now I get it. It's just like I'm still like aghast to the fact that this thing is so dangerous that a Time Lord literally needs to bring out a major villain to stop it. Like, what is he trying to prevent exactly? What will this thing end up doing if it's not stopped?
Well, as we later see, the Nurgle inside the machine is consuming it from the inside out and transforming it, terraforming it, presumably also harvesting the town for extra fuel. If it's a self-sustaining machine of death that's so huge and unstoppable that nothing can bring it down, then that would probably be an Avengers level threat. But for now, we've got ourselves a ragtag bunch of misfits and a grumpy lady with a gun. So, we'll see how well
Mandy,
that...
where'd you get that gun from?
She always packing heat.
You don't want to know where she pulled it out from.
Hammer space.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if she just hides all of her arsenal under Grimm's cloak.
Oh, that makes sense actually.
That's really smart.
Because it's a very voluminous looking cloak, and he's just a very, very lanky skeleton. Plus, if she's mastered certain demonic arts, and we see that there are other characters later in the story who are able to summon objects out of seemingly nowhere, so that's possibly a power that more than one person can learn.
Also, side note, I think every time Bleedman draws Sally, she gets cuter.
Oh yeah, she is very adorable.
Okay, I would like to see more of Mandy's capabilities, like what she could do, like in a fight more, rather than just like punch a kid.
That would make for a good prequel GTFO style.
Yeah, but no, we've definitely been told about how like martially good she is. She's been a hitman for like most of her adult career.
She's probably the reason her daughter's also so athletically skilled as well.
Punisher shit. Let's see it.
When you grow up around the supernatural antics that she did as a little kid, it probably conditions you to a certain extent as well. Grimm's
Yeah,
like, slash it with a scythe. Jack's like, tie them all together and confound them. Mandy's like, daka, 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 daka.
Yeah, even when she was a hitman and she was seemingly immortal, at least effectively immortal, she definitely seemed to prefer firearms.
Why go up close when you can engage from a distance?
Yeah,
even
exactly.
even later on, she ends up pulling out the gat and shooting something really small at a distance.
You can do more damage with a knife up close than you can with a gun from a distance due to just general, being, well, you know what I mean. It has to do with
But what if you shoot a knife?
well, then I guess you got me there.
I think if I pump you full of lead, your odds of surviving are lower than if I stab you.
True, but you can make up a lot of distance if you're carrying a knife versus someone.
We did
Shoot a knife, the bullet could bounce back.
I'm pretty sure that's just movies. The best you're gonna do is try to block it, and then it's going to blow the knife into pieces, and you're gonna get shrapnel in your face,
Yay!
and then maybe also a bullet in your face.
Yeah, the bullet will go through it.
Yeah, this is
I
long
like
before.
how Mandy's just there in that posture, and there's just like the pumpkinator.
This is long before Gun Carter and things like John Wick.
That'd be a neat prequel story. Mandy being taught everything he knows by John Wick.
Well, it depends on how far the crossover needs to go. I do remember a lot of feedback about how Mandy got generally unpretty in a lot of these pages.
Yeah.
Half
I
her
think
face
I
is
honestly just
looks
reckon
like
her
a
mouth's
slab.
about an inch too high, but anyway.
Looks like she pressed her face against like a window or something.
Her face
What a big
literally looks like a clothing sign.
And you can cut glass with her chin.
I forgot the guy's name. Lord Payne? Was that
Payne?
it? Yeah.
Charles.
That was the first time that he works for Mandy, right?
Well, it's the first sign that he's under her employ.
Yeah.
And he's clearly got some power up his sleeve, but it looks like Mr. Hungry Toothy Pumpkin Man is still stronger. And then here we go. The king of the eyebrows.
King of a lot of things.
He's actually got some great reaction face.
Yeah, he does.
No, this guy is made of pure swag. I'm just saying.
This is the first time that Mandy lays eyes on Dark Danny, and I believe it's the start of something very beautiful.
What's up with Mandy's eyes? She seems very angry about something.
She's
She's
always
always angry at everyone, everything.
Clockwork's clearly not malevolent here.
Well, no,
not-
he's a neutral. He's a neutral.
He's chaotic
Neutral
neutral,
force.
perhaps.
I'm not even sure if neutral's the right word here. He literally brought a villain to save the fucking timeline.
But clearly, him intervening to save Junior would imply that Junior has some sort of big destiny thing that can't afford to be messed up right now.
looking at the modern GTI. I actually wouldn't mind if they ruined his destiny.
His destiny at this point is to put on a dress.
His destiny at this point is to stop being a little bitch and actually do something.
That,
for a
last,
time-
that last
for-
panel has big cowabunga energy.
It does, doesn't it? And see, it's got the little white motion blur behind them as they jump in.
Yeah, that's a good detail.
It's very Scooby Doo.
There should be some like video game level intro music as soon as they hit there.
And then they appear in the pumpkin edit. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Here we go. This is the scene you were talking about where Nurgle pops up.
Yeah.
I feel like every time Nurgle Senior arrives, there's a lot of discussion.
I think the biggest problem with Nurgle entirely is that he's just an exposition machine. There is literally nothing else to his character. He's just,
It's not the
he's
real
just-
Nurgle either.
no, exactly. But like whatever Nurgle is entirely in this comic's existence, he's just an exposition machine.
Exactly.
Well, he turns up on the inside of people rather than physically outwardly of someone. So he's basically like the Jiminy Cricket of this whole comic. Oh, Nurgle's here. What do you have to say, Nurgle? Hey, listen.
Aside from all that, I noticed this page is doing something I don't think I see the comic ever do before or since. It's using a cliff note. Look, it's telling the reader to go back to chapter 3, page 13.
I was like
Oh,
when
yeah.
Clockwork was referring to Danny being unmade, and it said refer to Danny Phantom Ultimate Evil.
It could totally do that.
I think this was that definitely wasn't my doing. I don't think it's my intention to ever treat the readers like they're stupid. I'm
No,
trying
I mean,
to. I would like to think that anyone reading this page has read the entirety of the comic up to this point, and let's face it, at this point, there wasn't actually that much of the comic to slog your way through. If someone was doing a little addendum like this here on a current page in 2020, saying go back to chapter 3 or something, yeah, that's a bit more excusable. I think what Bleed just thought was the best idea would be to say, hey, just in case you're confused here, because there's a lot of text to read, here's something that might make it a little bit easier for you.
I think if you're going back and referring to specific things in the shows that this comic borrows from, that would make sense because not everyone has technically watched all the shows that these comics are referencing. But if you're referring to the comic within its own self-contained continuity, that kind of seems like you think the readers haven't been paying attention.
Wait, how tall is Grim?
very.
I think he can vary himself.
He's like 6 oranges or something. I don't know.
He looks like 10 feet tall or something.
2.5 football fields.
I'm getting a lot of numbers.
Anyway, this sort of is a double-edged bit of resentment because he resents Nurgle, because Nurgle and Grim are essentially polar opposites in what it is that they do. Nurgle is all about survival. Refer back to the big wall of text if you don't believe me. Grim's all about ending things and ferrying things to a new beginning, whereas Nurgle's just don't want to end. So there's this conflict between the two, but there's also the hidden subtext of Grim not being very happy with his wife's decision of who she chooses as a partner and what the result is. Then again, that might also come from the fact that if who Junior's dad is meant to be believed, she's never made the right decision. And yeah, this page rubbed a few people the wrong way. We have some conservative readers who are not very, they were happy to see Mini Mandy get torn apart, but no, we don't like it.
Check comments.
This is so fucked. Thank you, dumb fuck.
And this Pedro Faria person saying that Grim is death, he is not supposed to be able to bring life, but end it. Exactly. Which is why Junior, Grim, etc. will never have a biological child of their own. It has to
Somebody
be
said, fuck off, Nurgle.
Matter of fact, whenever Junior made Jewel with Mimi, spoilers.
non-canon. According
Hell
to current writing staff, says it's non-canon. So grain
Anyway,
of salt.
once again, you said that they can't reproduce a kid on their own, so that was technically a threesome that he had.
I'm wondering how much of this like lore and story kind of feels like the, as you all know, kind of like phrasing. You know what I mean? Like, there's no point in saying that phrase in any kind of writing because if everyone knows it, why are you saying it? It's just there for the reader. So I'm wondering how much of this within universe everyone knows, but they're just saying it out loud for the reader. You know what I mean?
Here's another recurring theme that I always like to see is that when the Nurgles try to like maintain a super shape, it always somehow turns into Mini.
A lot of people didn't see the spine poking out behind Mini's face and sort of assumed that it was like a fusion of the two, a very sort of final boss of Final Fantasy, sort of upside down.
Was that
monster.
like her actual dead corpse right there?
Yes. I believe that is what is implied. Like the
Oh,
Nurgle.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, it's her corpse.
It's kind of not at the same time because she did only have one arm on that corpse. She's presumably generating the rest of it through the Nurgle alone.
I do like that Junior's just hanging.
But when
there
you
like
work out the
a
actual body
ragdoll.
position, it's kind of compromising.
Oh, was this the first? Oh yeah, I just realized this is the first time we saw Junior as not a skeleton, right?
Yeah, fleshy form. It's basically his soul projection. Get your slammer tentacles off me, boy, as he yeets the corpse of Minnie away. But yeah, Grim himself's having a bit of a tantrum right now. So we can kind of see where Junior gets it from.
Yeah, he has been screaming his metaphorical head off for like the
Mm.
past 4 pages now.
Well, Mandy always said that Grim was pathetic. It only stands to reason that a child, reared by him would develop similarly, which is probably why it's a surprise later on when he actually turns out to be not so pathetic after all. But then he goes back to being pathetic again. But there's definitely a lot to unpack here when you've got these 3 cosmic beings all together, and then one just pieces out.
Coloring shift. Was this
No, I don't believe this was. Or maybe he did. I don't recall him working on it terribly much, but the shading on Nurgle does imply that there's a bit of Sayuga influence here.
Yeah, this is like that was a dramatic shift.
one of the big things Soyuga was always big on was having blacks not actually be fully black. So the background's already black, and the only reason the Grim stands out is because of the glowy white outline. He wanted Nurgle to appear more sleek and shiny.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that is actually a bit
More
of Soyuga.
leathery.
He probably didn't work on it for terribly long, but you can also see the differences in the shading for Mandy.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it looks a lot more leathery.
Yeah,
I will
there's
say,
texture.
I like the joke that Grim goes out of the portal and just like crashes on his face there.
But like Clockwork and Nurgle, yeah, I can call those cosmic entities. But Grim, I think that's giving him too much credit. He's kind of a bozo.
Fair enough. Also, the assurance that the Nurgle is going to make his ancestor pay is interesting, considering what happens with the Nurgle later on. Almost makes you think like something disingenuous is afoot. And I don't know why, but Dark Danny in that middle panel, his face looks very Disney.
Oh yeah, it does kind of look Disney.
So when's he gonna break out into a musical?
It's time
Yeah,
to
Grid,
express
where
my
the
hate.
fuck is the musical?
It's time to express my delight at being free to reign evil upon this world and bring chaos wherever I set foot in song.
It sounds like Perfect Cell.
Oh my gosh, that'd be amazing.
No, he's not going to be appearing in Grim Tales anytime soon.
I like how that Nurgling opens up into like a sound cannon.
Yeah, he's like fully absorbed the pumpkin robot now.
I like that it can even throw Danny off because it just
Look
it
to La
replicates
Luna.
his power.
Mm,
Yeah, look at this, another cliff note.
yeah, definitely not something that stuck around, fortunately.
Very unfortunate, actually. But like
think-
also against the cliff notes, like it's numbered and the pages aren't.
That always vexed me that there was no numbering to the pages. Like, just
Like
put, like, a-
yeah, even in old Snaf2, they were never numbered.
Yeah, so the titles I picked for the pages still carried over. I don't know why I didn't just refer to page titles. But also, yeah, this is a splash page. This is done in landscape format, so you can see that it's actually wider than it is tall. And this
Meanwhile,
was meant to, yeah, this was meant to be like an oomph moment. Later oomph moments include, hey, look who Mimi's mother is. I'm always big on these big sort of impactful minimum extra panel sort of pages to really send a message.
you know, if you got rid of the dialogue bubbles in this, you could make it like a poster almost.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, you could.
Turn it into a print. If you're a fan of Nurgle Jr. or just muscular, glowing grotesqueries, then this is your thing.
Somewhere.
Meanwhile,
In the Wasteland of Doom.
and this is heterochromia done right, by the way. Fucking kudos to whoever came up with that idea.
I will say one comment about what was it, heterochromia? I don't know if artists I noticed seem to make it either red and blue, though this is a good difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah, especially since it's not just a detail. These both have purpose.
And I will say I like that it's blue and not red like Mandy's eyes are.
Yeah, more like Timmy Turner.
It makes it fresher.
Timmy Turner. Well, his originally father, according to Grizz, was supposed to be Timmy Turner, right?
These past two
God,
chapters
that's
were some of the
so
strongest in the whole
Think you're
series.
about-
Oh, definitely. Not even just in the series, but like some of the best work Bleedman's ever done. Like even just these, like the power of some of these moments, it hooks the people. Like I'm still here, like what, 15 years later?
Mm-hmm.
So this page was the starting point for Junior's road to redemption sort of thing. This is where the character building was really meant to amp up, which is why it's been such a shame to see it completely undone again in recent times. But besides the visual hints to who his father is and, you know, the fact that he's got the mismatched eyes because one of them is actually his sister's, this was a pivotal moment, this upcoming bit. And I feel like, oh my gosh, he's so hot. I hope he's talking about the Redeemer, or she rather.
No, she's totally talking about Junior.
Mhm.
She's
Well, there
into
you go.
assholes.
That Junior, such a
Yeah.
pretty boy.
The comic up to this point had courted a fair bit of controversy, obviously starting with the 9/11 page, and the Nazis, leading into Minnie getting torn to pieces, and then the stuff with all the text.
So wait,
Yeah.
how did Junior get here again?
His soul has left his body thanks to
Like a
clockwork.
soul coma.
See, I always kind of assumed this was some kind of like alternate purgatory, basically.
He's in the what they call it, the upside down.
Yeah, I guess that
in-between?
can make sense.
You know, purgatory has different visuals to different people. A barren Arctic wasteland tundra sort of thing could easily be one of those. And he's just been dropped off here. And the assumption from Clockwork is that then he'll discover what he needs to do by himself. Because if he's guided any further, and let's face it, up to this point, everyone's been doing everything for Junior. And he's been very ungrateful for it. It's time he stood on his own 2 feet.
Yeah, and then actual character development happens. A lot of things get explained. It's so good. Like I always bring back this snow section, like the spirit world section.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mhm.
always bring it back when I want to explain good story pacing.
But there's also the sense of urgency on the outside too. Whereas if he doesn't accomplish his task, everyone's still in danger.
I think being such a shitty character as he is now, would he even care?
I don't think he'd be fully conscious of it. I think his mind is firmly set on his sister.
And we all know the Redeemer doesn't actually care about what happens to Hal. He's
He'll
only
be
here for one
fairly
person.
set on his sister now, but then later on he'll find this long-haired chick, spoilers, and then he'll just forget about Minnie.
To your point, Minnie, I think that's the general misconception. People believe that his feelings for Minnie are the same as Minnie's feelings for him. I don't believe that that was ever the case. What he's doing now is a quest for almost for gratitude, I suppose. She gave everything for him. He wants to then go out and rescue her from whatever awaits her. But then that whole message gets misconstrued, and that's what leads to certain emotional breakdowns later on.
Misconstrued is a word for it. Yeah, let's just put
I don't
let's
think.
just put a Nurgle heart at the end of the comic and just say it's misconstrued.
I think the interpretation of love is different between the two, and that's where the
It's
eventual
It's
disconnect.
obvious. It's obvious one loves the other more, but like, I
Oh,
don't
for
know.
sure.
I feel like we could have an entire discussion about what could have been in its own video.
Oh, there'll be plenty of time for that.
Time
Since
to
we're
draw the incest porn.
well, I'm sure there's been plenty of that. Now that we've also been assured that the main plot of the comic is returning in some capacity down the track, perhaps the answers are still to come. But it's I'll reserve my insight on that. Well, so basically we're now at a point where Junior's personal quest is about to begin. Everyone's in danger. It's up to him to basically save everybody, and he's probably not even aware he's doing it because all he wants to do is get his bitch of a sister back. So Chapter 5 will be where we start our next podcast. I want to thank everyone who's been listening for us today. Hopefully this has been insightful to you. And when you read the comic by yourselves, whenever it was that you did that, maybe you saw something in the subtext or in the visuals that we didn't discuss. So feel free to let us know, however you wish to, of what we might have missed talking about today. But we are very grateful that you've been listening to us today, all of us here at the podcast. And we did have Kato at some point too, but he might have dropped off the.
Yeah, I think
off
I think he left the server because you spoke over him.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, we'll deal with that at a later stage. But hopefully you've enjoyed Grimtail's.
Remember to
chapters
hit that
3
bell
and
and that subscribe button.
Yeah, tell your friends about us, and we have a Discord. So if you want to be a part of future discussions and let us know what you think, then feel free to get in touch with us. You can also find us via the official Snaf2 Comics Wiki. Our good friend Colin is the moderator of that, and he will allow you to join us with our Discord link there if you'd like to then get amongst our community. So definitely come see us at the Discord and also on the Snaf2 Wiki, where you can find each and every page of Grimtails up to that point if you want to look at any particular page in greater detail. All right, that'll probably do it for us today. Thanks once again. Fabian's going to have a good time putting all this together in post-production. And whenever it is that we get together for chapters 5 and 6, we look forward to seeing you then, when someone else will do the intro and hopefully exude as much enthusiasm as I did today.
I just want to point out that this is still being recorded before the first podcast is going to come out. So if you have any constructive criticism, please point it out in the comments for us.
All right, we might leave it there then, guys. Thank you so much once again for all being here. We look forward to putting together another podcast for you all very soon. And remember, we love you.
Bye-bye.